even though everybody is going to be completely different for you. There's kind of a standard that you start with, and then based on every variable, age, activity, things that you may perceive about their metabolism is different, their social and dietary preferences, things like that, you'll start making those little changes here and there, and you'll find it really works. That's real life nutrition. Let's talk about the different types of diets there are where we can bring some principles. We've been fans of some, we've bashed some, but I'm somebody who really likes to learn from everything. And even if we think something is not necessarily the most effective, not only is there something we can probably learn from that, but there's a reason people are attracted to it. There's a reason they keep coming back into culture.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something that we can take from that and make it effective, kind of hijack it for a good purpose instead of something that's otherwise gonna hurt people. So just as a very quick review, because we went through this a couple different times, calorically, you guys are going to want to nail that first. That should be your first thought process, even though it's the sexy thing to talk about macros. You still have to know where those macros are coming from. How much protein, carbs, and fat are you actually putting into somebody's diet? So start there as your home base. Then you're looking at protein. There's the RDA. 1.5 to 2 times the RDA is the more acceptable thriving level, up to 3 times the RDA, and these are all in the book. You guys probably know this by now, 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. And then you move into fat percentage, and again, I think this is most easily done by looking at a percentage of fat, because outside of the structural need of protein, when you get to dietary fat, as long as you're not really wacky in one direction or the other, as long as you're not somebody who thinks you need all fat or somebody who needs no fat, your clients are generally going to be in that middle group where you can fluctuate or range them in places where it just makes more sense, because either you can get more carbohydrate that way because you pull their fat down a little lower, or maybe they just preferentially like higher levels of fat, and so you can make that concession. But I want to emphasize that all of the research, and we were really, really big on this in the guide, shows very clearly that a lower fat, higher carb diet, and by higher carb I mean 40 to 60% of calories from carbs, is the most effective. And that's on several reasons: anabolically, metabolically, just the way people feel mentally, their acuteness, mental agility, so to speak, and all of that. So I don't want to beat that horse any more than we already have. That's all in the book. But let's say, Tyler, somebody says, well, for my diet, I just prefer higher fats. I've always done well that way. I lost 60 pounds on the Atkins diet, and so that's what I want to start with. How would you handle that?
Well, I'd go through their history and find out, you did the Atkins diet. Now, how successful were you? Did you gain any weight back?
Well, yeah, that's why I'm here with you.
Yeah,
gained it all back. But it worked. But it worked, Tyler. I lost 60 pounds.
You have to ask yourself, is that really successful? If you lose the weight initially, but you're gaining the weight back. So we want to get to the point where you're not gaining any of that back. So trying to help them understand why they gain it back, and by eliminating the carbs, like we talked about before, that is something that's not sustainable. And so we need to really refocus and reshift their mindset that, hey, you can lose weight with carbs. We just need to kind of shift and let you start to believe that carbs aren't bad and that carbs aren't the enemy. So just gradually making those shifts. So you can start off a little bit higher, fats to kind of help their mental psyche, I guess you could say, and kind of shift things down, but let them know ahead of time that, hey, we're going to be transitioning carbs, but I want you to get better at your habits daily and understanding, looking at carbs differently. Because if they're really in this belief that carbs are bad, but they're probably eating a huge abundance of them currently, but they don't think they're bad, but they think in dieting aspect they're bad. Just kind of shifting their mindset is a big, big thing with people I've worked with. And then once I get that instilled, they start believing it, then they realize, wow, I didn't know I could eat so much carbs and actually lose weight. And so when they get to that point, then it's really kind of coasting from there.
And one of the things, guys, I don't want you to think that we're just picking a safe space to not be on an extreme because hey, we're curriculum guys now. We've got to be professional and make sure everybody's doing things safe. That's just the truth. It's just the way it works. You can believe the research out there, and even those people though who might have some kind of metabolic or health condition that makes them just feel better with more fat more fat, less carbs. And I know people sometimes say, well, if somebody has PCOS or they're hypothyroid, they feel more insulin sensitive. I would always still argue though that those are overall metabolic conditions. So it's the speed of which you use calories, not the ratios and the percentage. So I would still argue that even those people, if you start giving them less fat and a little bit more carbohydrates, often the case is because of a slower metabolism, they can really live with less protein. And that's very indicative. We talked about me as a case study, super low metabolism as evidenced by, hypothyroidism. So I maintain muscle mass pretty well, and so I can drop my protein a little bit and make room for more carbs because remember, when protein minimums are met, more protein does nothing for us, but more carbs increase our metabolism, they increase our rate of recovery, increase our anabolic environment for muscle recovery. So it's a no-brainer to me to always start with the lowest amount of fat somebody can tolerate socially. If I want a little peanut butter, a little slice of cheese, something like that. But at the same time, the more we can pull fat down and bring carbs up, that's just metabolically the best.
Now, do you start slower, or do you just go right away lower fats and higher carbs?
You mentioned this a couple times in the video series, and I completely agree that to meet them where they are and reduce gradually is best, and probably because it allows them to make one different decision at a time. Like, okay, I'll give up eating cheesecake every night.
It's like the 10% that we just talked about.
Yeah, 10% happier. Like, let's just make one decision at a time. And then later you can say, you know what, there's actually a better version of this. Like, you can get a lower fat yogurt, or, maybe we don't need to use mayonnaise on your sandwich. Maybe you can use, mustard. Or a fat-free version. And so you can make those, but I do think this is the real value of a protracted education process for your clients. When they're tracking their food, you can prove this works. You can say, look, here's what we were eating then. And I often see this with clients when they hit a sticking spot. Like, let's say they haven't lost for a couple weeks. When I have their cumulative history, in a summary form where I can see it all in one place, I can go back and say, well, 3 months ago you were losing 2 pounds a week every week right here, and look at what you were eating. What's changed? And sometimes it's numerical. We can actually see it on the paper. Sometimes it's just like, well, I don't know. I guess I've been taking a couple bites here and there, not tracking it, or I've been doing this, or maybe it's, well, I changed jobs and now I eat this for lunch every day instead of that. But when you've got all that data, you can find what works and you can show them.
It's like what Occam's razor, is that what it's called? The X factor of what something changed in the last 2 weeks that you're describing, that maybe they weren't doing that before, but now they are. Now they're eating bites extra here and there. And there's something there that's different than what you're doing before. And you can see all the data in front of you.
Yeah, and this is one thing that I wanted to make sure we go over, guys, because it has a lot to do with your success and longevity with clients. This is going to happen with almost every single client you work with. And that is, at some point, they're going to reach some kind of a plateau, and you need to know what to do. It's incredibly normal for a nutrition coach's first response to be, well, let's just reduce food. Or if you're one of the weird people who think that you have to increase food to lose weight. So let's address that first. Okay. One more time. We did this before. You have to understand what the human metabolism is capable of. You have to understand that we're all genetically different. So on a continuum, you've got the people with the fastest metabolisms here, people with the slowest here. How many people down here do you think are going to be seeking your services?
Not as many.
They don't need you. They're either already lean or they just have to make a simple change and they drop
Yeah.
weight. It's the people who really struggle that seek us out more than not. So they don't have the super metabolic capacities. Secondly, I don't think we've mentioned this in the whole video series, it takes a massive, consistent calorie deficit to truly suppress your metabolism.
For a long period of time, right? Or just
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So medically, what's called a very low calorie diet is 500 calories or less, and that some medical clinics do this for people who need an actual health intervention, and it is kind of a controlled fasting or controlled starvation. But here's what's interesting: you have to do that consistently, eat that low for 2 to 3 months to see your metabolism start to appreciably decline. There is a lot of research coming out now. I know a lot of guys in the exercise science world who are really trying to nail down how much we can affect metabolism with food. And I know they're just going to basically prove what we already know, which is acutely you can make some small changes. And this, if it's aggressive, like starvation. I recently did a podcast on fasting. And so you know if we either reduce calories drastically or altogether, we initially use all the stored glycogen, the stored carbs in our body. Then we start using the fat substrates in our body, triglycerides and all that. Then we start getting into stored body fats and then even amino acids, right? If you guys remember insulin and glucagon, the oppositional hormones for fat loss or fat retrieval, when you start fasting, and I mean like eating nothing, within, initially glucagon goes sky high because it's out there scavenging all these energy sources. As soon as you get to about the 4th or 5th day of fasting, glucagon comes way down. Your body's just protecting against starvation.
Okay, starvation mode. Now, are you fasting all 5 days? Like
zero.
completely zero? Okay, I was thinking you're still having like a small meal like at the end or something.
Well, in that scenario, that's the protracted thing. So, like I said, I saw one study where 500 calories a day for 3 months took somebody's metabolism to an unnaturally suppressed level. But you can do that in 5 days of zero food.
5 days. You die in like 2 days. Like, how long can you go without starving before you die?
It could be months. It could be 2 to 3 months.
I feel like I'm
Yeah,
dying.
you might die tomorrow. You might die by dinner. So those are the contextual differences between zero food, 500 calories, and my point to you guys is, if you have a client who you think needs more food because their metabolism is slowed down, I'm gonna totally call bullshit. First of all, physiologically, unless they have been fasting or starving on that very very low calorie diet.
You look at I'm sure you heard this before, the concentration camps back in the day, at the World War II, they were starving, and they all were skinny and lean. Like, there's some kind, there's truth to that, where their metabolism's not broken.
Nobody was sitting around overweight saying, gosh, my metabolism stopped working. And so I want you guys to keep this in the context. We're talking about what to do when your clients hit a plateau. The first thing is not for you to freak out thinking they need more food, not for them to freak out and tell you that they need more food, but understand if they have been dieting in just an aggressively suppressed long-term way, that's a possibility. 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, that is not at all what's happening. So here's what I want you to think of. I want you to think of a list. This would be something good to even jot down.